Hey family, how you doing? This is your brother Dharmir D. So I just got done watching this video done by Dr. Boyce Watkins um, about the Diddy and Mase, the recent Diddy and Mase um, tussle, I guess is what I'll call it. And I am a major admirer of Dr. Watkins. He has been one of them people that has done more to bring me into a mature mindset, a mindset great enough to reach for my dreams than any one man has ever done. My father passed away when I was a teenager, young teenager, so he never had that opportunity to kind of sculpt me. Um, I really do appreciate everything that Dr. Watkins does. And my response to his video was very emotional. And I do my best to work on that because I'm a very, 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 very passionate person. But I think Dr. Watkins himself was a little bit surprised by the emotion that was shown on the video because Dr. Watkins took a very predictable path in dissecting what is going on between Mase and Diddy. Now, if you don't know, short version of it is Diddy made a statement the other day, I guess at the Grammys, saying that uh, artists need to take back the industry, need to do, need to. He's all about the artist and making sure that the artists are powerful and what have you. Mase came out and said, "Well, that's not how you've acted, and this is not how you're acting. Presently, I offered you a couple $1 million to buy my publication rights, and you told me no because these white people um, can give you more. And you're talking about black excellence, but you're not actually living up to that." Now, Dr. Watkins took a very predictably pro business stance with this. They had a contract. The contract was, this, and this, and it wasn't a good deal for Mase, but it was a great deal for Diddy, yada, 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 yada. I could see that coming. Dr. Watkins is a very conservative-minded businessman. His blackness does obviously influence how he philosophically puts together his business strategies, which is awesome. We need more black people like that. But I think in this instance, he didn't read, to be honest, he didn't read the room correctly. He failed to understand the emotional significance of both Diddy and Mase. Now, we can talk about all day long that emotionality is a problem. Emotionality is a problem. Emotionality is a problem. But Philippe Jacques Matthews on his show pointed out that emotional intelligence is not a problem. It is an intelligence. When you utilize it correctly, what they have found, what Europeans have found is when you match emotional intelligence, the emotional performance of a person, with the mental performance, no other group of people achieve higher and greater results than black folks. It's an important fact. But Dr. Watkins seemed genuinely caught off guard by the anti-Diddy sentiment that sprung up. And I understood, I was, again, emotional response, not my best hour. But I understood it, and I think I can explain it. Because so much of the economic standpoint of Dr. Watkins draws from a European perspective, he does not appreciate, to an extent, the influence of our Africanness on how we react to people who are in the spotlight. And this is something that I had to learn. We think of ourselves as African Americans. more Americans than Africans, even though we have to reconnect to Africa. Well, what we fail to see is that in the history of Africa, America is a blip on the screen. We don't consider how millions of years of evolution in Africa are still impacting how we process stuff, how we respond to stuff, even how we intake certain things. For instance, when it comes to business people, we look at business people, particularly the millionaires, billionaires, the people who are making deals, we consider that a diplomatic stance from our historical memory. That is a diplomatic stance. A person who is making deals between groups of people in Africa is held in a very high regard. They are an elder. No matter if they're 20 or they're 80, they're an elder. And we can talk about black people losing this concept. Good luck with that. But it's likely not going to happen. Moreover, we are a oral people. We have always been an oral people. That is how we survived in slavery. But it goes back to Africa. Now, it was clear that Dr. Watkins didn't know what other people knew about Diddy and Mase. Now, if I could do it all again, I would entertain greater what Dr. Watkins was talking about, because it was about contracts, and I understand the contracts, but it was a wrong example to use, because people remember that Diddy, Puff Daddy back in the day, before Bad Boy was Bad Boy, it was known as something else, which I want to say it's Uptown Records, something like that. And it was Diddy and I believe Heavy D who was involved in it. And Diddy pushed Heavy D out. Now, this goes to something that Dr. Watkins likes to say, and I like this as a hashtag, by the way, which is business is war. Well, why is business war? Business is war because business comes from a European standpoint. Now, for the European, business is how they feed their clan. We always have to remember, Europe does not have a lot of, what's the word I'm looking for? A lot of natural extractions. They don't have a lot of natural resources, which I hate using that phrase. That's why I use natural extractions. Metals and stuff that they need to build their lives, they don't have that there. They have to go to other places. Business is war for them because it's life or death. And in that way, we have to thank Dr. Watkins for giving us that, because we don't look at business as war, and we should. I mean, he changed my mind with that. Moreover, he pointed out that there's a lot of people who want to there's more people who want to get on the stage than to own the stage. That's huge. That is huge. We need to own the stage. Now, again, to go back to Diddy, Diddy pushed out Heavy D. And he did it so then he could start working for the distributor, which was white owned, and to make a product that the distributor wanted made. Now, there is a huge, and I don't know if Dr. Watkins knows this, but in 1994 with the Telecommunications Act, there is a huge rearrangement of the communication system. I think it was 92. There was a law that was passed also that limited through imposing hefty not fines, but a hefty revenue charge to people who wanted to do music like what Public Enemy was doing back then, which was using a bunch of samples. It puts the revenue stream was expanded so much that I think Chuck D once said that one of the songs would have cost something like, a couple $100,000 to produce. And so that changed music altogether. It changed music altogether. Diddy, yeah, business is war. Diddy must have seen some of these changes coming because he got in front of it. He forced Heavy D out of, I'm going to just call it Uptown Records. And then he repositioned it as a mainstream outlet. Now, it's clear to me, and I don't know if Dr. Watkins knows about this, but it's clear to me that his angle was not necessarily shared by Biggie, who went against his wishes and went out to California. But what's also clear to me is that there's this thing called a lifetime service contract in the music industry, and it goes for specific time frames. Jermaine Dupri got called out because of his contract with I always get the two of them mixed up. I think it's Total. And in that contract, he took them girls for every penny that they were worth. Now, in hindsight, because Dr. Watkins is a businessman, it makes sense that he would say, well, you got to understand the contract. You have to understand the contract. You have to, that's fine and good if you're dealing with equal representation and if you're dealing with upstanding people. But back then, and even to an extent today, but back then, they would deliberately make these contracts complex and hide things in them that if you read them at a quick glance, even some lawyers would miss some of these details. Now, some people wondered back, in the day, to let you know, in the early part of the 2000s, I was really interested in music, and I read several books on the music business and the legal structure of music contracts and what have you. And it's actually a very interesting subject, to be honest with you, because there's a lot more legalistic stuff than you realize in music, which I didn't realize, but it's what it is. Anyway, so some people would wonder if those lawyers were missing those points or if they were just deliberately washing them over, because as long as they got paid, who cares if the artist ended up with 5% of whatever they made, and those contracts were already not good. For instance, I'm trying to remember the exact numbers. So if you put out a CD, you might get 12% of that, of what they sold the CD for, which back then was about, I think it was $13, $14. So no, it was less than that. I think it was nine something. So because it equaled out to just over $1 that you'd get. And then you had to pay back studio costs, promotion costs, overhead costs, things like that. Now, if you looked at the breakdown of the CD, of what they were actually paying for with the CD, that was ludicrous, because oftentimes they would have baked into the cost of the CD studio time, promotion, marketing, but you would have to pay back a percentage of that. to them, particularly, let's say you were a highly sought artist and it took them 3 or 4 years to develop you, you'd have to pay that back. Okay, fine. Maybe it cost, put it on the high end, $1 million. So you have to pay that back. Now, obviously, if you never make it big, then you're never going to pay that $1 million back. But if you are big, what typically happened was there would be clauses in the contract that allowed them to beef up what you had to pay back. Now, of course, you and I would say, well, that's ridiculous. Why would you sign such a contract? Why wouldn't you have a lawyer look it over for you? Well, because they were all in on it. So you would go to a lawyer and the lawyer would look it over and say, oh yeah, that's great, excellent, because they would be getting a piece of it. Now, I don't know if Dr. Watkins knew this. Now, Tupac, because Tupac actually comes into this thing. Tupac and Biggie, before both of their deaths, which is, suspicious, Tupac and Biggie and a number of other artists were talking about putting together a record label, a distribution company, and a agency, a artist agency. I think that one might have come first, where they would start to represent these young artists who are getting completely wrecked by these contracts and by these shady deals. Now, I don't know if Dr. Watkins knows that. That's why, I'm not, the emotional response that I had originally, it was childish. It was childish. And so I got to get, better hold of that, because this information is important. These young artists were being screwed. And it wasn't just Diddy. Jermaine Dupri was doing it. I mean, anyway. So they were going to put those things together. Professor James Small, now, Dr. Watkins is a busy man, so he doesn't have any time to do this type of research. But Dr. James Small, who's an elder in the community himself, he, in an interview with, I think it was Irritated Genie, he was talking about many things, and he talked about Tupac. He said he had actually talked to Tupac a little while before he was killed, or shot anyway. He died a few days later. And Tupac was talking about, how did he explain it? Tupac was talking about doing something. Maybe it was just starting his record label and stuff. And Professor Smalls told him, said, you're dealing with some real money here. You're dealing with the Italian mob. You're dealing with the Jewish mafia. I hope you know what you're doing. And he's like, yeah, I'm good. Then he was shot and, dead. In other words, business is war. Yes, Dr. Watkins is absolutely right with that. Business is war. And what you saw with people like Diddy, even Jermaine Dupri to an extent, what you saw with a lot of these people was assuming a role of leadership and using treachery to get there, using dishonorable business practices because of, that's what white people were doing. That's what these people did. That is what these people did. And, we kind of gotta, again, I don't know if Dr. Watkins knows all this, but we kind of got to get to a point where we recognize this. And, the story here is so rich with information. And with Mase and Diddy, we can learn a lot here. We can learn a lot. Knowing the history is one lesson we can learn. What is the history of these things? You know, what role does culture play in our response to these things? There's a book that I would definitely encourage you guys to get. I've encouraged you to get it before. Let me go and grab it because I didn't know I was going to bring it up. This is the book. Get it. It talks about our African linkage to our culture now. It is one of the best books. It kind of bugs me because this was supposed to be an introduction to a new way of studying us as Black folks. And I don't believe many people have picked this up, man. This is powerful. So, those are two ways of looking at this. A third way is, how did European business practices influence the action of Puff Daddy? And how did European practices influence the actions of Mase? And I guess even a fourth one is, how has our personal experience caused us to look at this differently? I like Dr. Watkins enough to say that I think that's really what he was trying to get us to do, was look at this in a different way. And it's difficult to look at it in a business way when you know the history of Puffy. And when you know that there's something deeper that went on there. I mean, it's not simply economics, Europeans try to make economics out to be the end all be all. And, economics touches everything except for when you are going to consider actual economics that is actually impacting people's individual lives. Then it doesn't touch everything. Then it's kind of away from everything. It's not cultural, it's not psychological, it's not emotional, it's not communal. It's just there. That's the European way of looking at economics. Whereas Africans don't see economics that way. Economics is very much a part of everything. And in this instance, Dr. Watkins, he tripped a wire. Economics comes from an old Greek word that means housekeeping. He tripped over a wire leading into the house and didn't realize it. So, this was about more than just money. This was way more about more than just money. This is a cultural thing. This is a historic thing. This is a heretical thing. And yes, we need to build. Dr. Watkins is right about that. We need to build. And we need to check ourselves at the door as we build. We need to live to a high standard. We do need to live to a high standard. It's difficult, but we can do it. So I want to say sorry to Dr. Watkins, for being too emotional. I was too emotional. But I also want to claim that emotion, because to get past it, I'm going to have to, be okay with utilizing it, I guess. Question, comments, concerns, leave them below. Peace, family.